Greetings everyone, it is I, the Future Godfather, and welcome back to another video. And today I'm going to be talking about the new EP, not album, EP, from Burial, Streetlands. Okay, so let's talk about a more recognizable name in the electronic music world, shall we? Burial, real name William Emmanuel Bevan, is a British electronic musician from South London who actually became the first ever artist to be signed to the record label Hyperdub 17 years ago in 2005, which is pretty cool. A year following this, he bursted onto the UK dubstep scene with the release of his critically acclaimed and influential subtitled debut album in 2006, showcasing his own unique, dark, and emotive version of UK garage and two-step, which are indeed UK rave music styles. He further cemented himself as one of the most enigmatic electronic music producers of the 21st century when he released his sophomore album the following year in 2007, and one of my personal all-time favorites, Untrue. An album where he essentially builds upon the sound that he explored on his debut by taking cues from UK garage, ambient, and hardcore music, as well as using some pitch-shifted and time-stretched vocal samples more frequently, resulting in becoming a benchmark in the dubstep subgenre. Although I do prefer Untrue over the self-titled in terms of how striking it was on a personal level, I'd say both of those projects are absolutely worth your time to be sure, with a lot of excellent gems to be found within them. However, instead of going forward with plans to making a third album, he spent the rest of his career thus far making a bunch of EPs he made in between 2011 and 2019, which all culminated to a 2019 compilation of tracks from those EPs called, well, to 2011 to 2019, which I enjoyed a lot. I enjoyed it a lot because not only did it continue to convey Burial's great ear from making these atmospheric type tracks, but it was also varied, like really varied. From his usual UK garage tracks that seem to come back to both of his mainline albums, to spooky but immersive ambient compositions, it felt like those 7 EPs were supposed to be 7 important parts sticking together under one huge arc in the story or something. Honestly, one of my favorite projects in this capacity to date. But then, 2 years later, he continued to release EPs, and he still does that to this day. But the EP that stuck out to me the most since that compilation was an EP that came out 9 months prior to Streetlands, Antidawn. I will be brief with this one since this video is supposed to be focusing on the Streetlands EP, but I thought the Antidawn EP was a pretty solid collection of the ambient material that he was going for since his late 2010s work. I saw in the Wikipedia article for this one that a critic compared that project to the KLF's Chill Out, and while I can totally see why, the atmosphere on that album was much better executed than the atmosphere on Antidawn. Still, this is a great EP that still evokes that same dark feeling the listener gets when just soaking in the atmosphere of his tracks, while still putting his recognizable sound on full display. Totally feel like that I would put it in the lower 8 range if I were to cover it myself. And now that takes us to this new EP over here, which seems to take cues from Antidawn when it comes to the overall sound. And what do I think about it? It's also great. I will admit that I prefer Antidawn over this because I feel like that project had more room for his tracks to get fleshed out, but there are also definitely a lot of good moments throughout the course of its running time, despite the fact that there's only 3 tracks here. Now, let's go through them individually. The EP opens up with the near 8-minute long track Hospital Chapel, which, I'll be honest, is probably my least favorite track of the 3. Don't get me wrong though, it's a good track and all, but the one minor gripe I have with it is its lack of progression. Granted, not all the tracks have a ton of progression to begin with, since these 3 tracks are really just ambient pieces that run on for long periods of time, but it's probably the least fleshed out of the 3 in my book. However, there are definitely more positives I have with this opener than negatives. The paths that flow through this one do give off some lonely and isolated vibes from the get-go. And to add on to this, I feel like these vibes from the track are kind of similar to the vibes I get from the ambient-centric stuff from Untrue I've seen with tracks like In McDonald's or Endorphin. Not really much for me to say about this track specifically, but it's a good opener, albeit a bit more forgettable than everything else on here, and I'd probably put it on as background music for the most part. However, the project then starts to pick up some steam with the title track, which, wow, I love this. It's the longest track on the album by far, clocking in at a whopping 14 minutes total, but man is it justified. There's a lot going on through this one free-flowing ambient track, ranging from the wind noises with the hits and some wind chimes in the beginning, to the beautiful vocal snippets, to even these immersive paths that happen somewhere in the middle of the track. Some of these ambient synth passages in the back half of this one actually remind me of the work of Tim Hecker in some areas, sounding somewhere in between Harmony and Ultraviolet and Virgins as to how powerful and apocalyptic it feels. This whole track on top of that makes me feel like it's this theme song to what would happen if all life on Earth were to go extinct. Going through the parts of the track that kind of represent the phases that lead us to an Earth without anything or anyone. With the last few minutes of the track feeling like the soundtrack to what it has become in the end, very desolate. I'm sorry if this is kind of a weird analogy, but that's what it feels like to me. By far the best track in the bunch. That leads us to the 12-minute closer, Exo Kind, and I don't have anything much to say about it compared to the previous track, but this is really solid. While its atmosphere doesn't pull me in as effectively as the title tracks, I also do think it's as good as that one at the same time. The most prominent things that stuck out to me about this track from the get-go are those arpeggiated synths that happen 1 minute into this track, which make for the grooviest part of the entire EP for me, and they also actually remind me of stuff from Orbital's Brown album, which is definitely saying something. While it does feel like it kind of meanders a bit in spots, I'm not gonna lie when I say that it also feels like it has some sense of momentum behind it throughout its many different phases, ranging from the aforementioned section with the arpeggios to that one part near the 7-minute mark, which feels like I'm an astronaut going on a mission through space, to that one dramatic section near the 8:30 mark, to the last 2 minutes or so that also reminds me of going to space, except I'm continuously floating through it for all of eternity and beyond without a spaceship to help me. Really solid way to close things out. And that's pretty much everything on Streetlands. There was nothing much for me to go on about from an individual track perspective, not just because of the very low quantity of tracks, but also because of its simplicity. However, I will not deny that all the tracks are at least good enough for me to distinguish them all. Even if the one thing they have in common is that they run together at times, all of them do have a distinct identity apart from each other, and even the least interesting moments like Hospital Chapel aren't that bad, but just a bit unmemorable in comparison to more interesting moments like on the title track or Exo Kind. I will completely understand if you are mildly underwhelmed by this project. I will admit that in addition to running together a bit at times, I obviously do prefer the more instantly intriguing stuff that he brought onto the table with his 2 albums and his 2019 compilation. But I still do give it my recommendation if you are more interested in his ambient-centric material than his UK garage material that he was known for in the mid to late 2000s. So yeah, really solid EP that I liked a lot, and I think you should go check it out if you want. This and Antidawn. I'll let this get away with a light 8 out of 10. But what do you think about this EP? If you have any thoughts or if you'd like me to review something, you can feel free to let me know in the comments. Please remember that everything I said in this video is all my opinion and only reflects on personal enjoyment. If you want to listen to this EP, I have provided a Bandcamp link which will be in the description of this video down below. Also, please subscribe to the channel if you want so you don't miss videos like this one. But yeah, this is it for today. Thank you for watching, and until then, this is me, the future Godfather, signing out. Take care, stay safe, and have a fantastic day.